Welcome back, guys. Today we're going to be looking at the second topic in our unit on probability, and today's topic is 5.2, odds and probability. Now, probability is not a new term. You've been working with it and using it since junior high. However, odds is a new term. That being said, you will have likely heard it in mainstream media, especially when we're talking about sports or anything to do with gambling or chance. However, it's quite often misused in media. And so it's important as we work through this topic today that you really pay attention to the difference between probability and odds. All right, so before we get into talking about odds, we want to do a quick review on probability. So probability deals with the mathematics of chance. And there's two types of probability. There's experimental probability and there's theoretical probability. And experimental probability is the one that you would have likely done quite a bit in junior high. And so with experimental probability, you're actually doing the experiment, and your probability would be the number of favorable outcomes that you get out of the number of trials that you do. So if you want, for example, you're rolling a coin or rolling a die, and you roll a die 10 times and you want to see how many times you get a 4, however many times you get that 4 out of the 10 trials that you did would be your experimental probability. In high school, we deal primarily with theoretical probability, and with theoretical probability, we're looking at the number of favorable outcomes out of the total sample space. And so when we're talking about theoretical probability, we're talking about the parts we want out of the whole or out of the total. So theoretical probability is parts out of a whole. Now let's look at odds. Before we get into the definitions, let's look at an example. So when we're thinking about a diagram here, we've got 4 black marbles and 5 white marbles in a bag, and we want to select a marble at random. Well, let's start with probability first. So let's state the probability that the marble being selected is black. Well, there's 9 marbles in there, and 4 out of the 9 are black. So the probability of getting a black is 4 out of 9. What's the probability of not getting a black? Well, this is the complement of getting a black, so this would be 5 out of 9. So let's go through these statements. The events black and not black are called complementary events. So this is a review from the last lesson. Complementary events. And the sum of the probabilities of complementary events is 1. So if we added 4 over 9 plus 5 over 9, we would get 1. Now let's take a look at odds. If we take a look back at our definition here, the probability of getting a black was the number of black marbles out of the total number of marbles. So in this case, it was 4 out of 9. So the chance of getting a black marble was 4 out of 9, and the chance of not getting a black marble was 5 out of 9. That's probability. So it's less likely that a black marble will be selected than a non-black marble, and we can express this in a way called odds. So when we do odds, we say that the odds of selecting a black marble are 4 to 5, or we say it as the odds in favor of selecting a black marble is 4 to 5, because there's 4 ways to select a marble, and 4 ways to select a black marble, and 5 ways to not select a black marble. We can also express this as the odds against. So the odds against selecting a black marble are 5 to 4. So 5 times of not selecting a black marble to 4 times of selecting a black marble. Now, odds are almost always expressed in a ratio. However, they can be expressed as a fraction. You will not see me express odds as a fraction because this is the way we're already doing probability, and I don't want to cause more confusion. So when we're talking about odds in favor of getting a black is 4 to 5. So that means for every 4 times we get a black, there's 5 times that we don't, not black. If we do odds against, notice then it's the opposite. 5 times that we don't get a black to 4 times that we do. So when we're doing odds, it's often easiest to start off with what the favorable one is. And if it's odds in favor of or odds for, then it goes at the start of the ratio. If it's odds against, then that favorable piece goes on the second side. So the biggest difference, and this is super important for you to keep track of, the biggest difference between probability and odds. Probability is parts over whole. So our total amount goes at the bottom of that fraction. Odds is part to part, and those parts add up to our total. Okay? Very commonly, odds are expressed as probability in the media, and it's really important that we decipher between the two in math. So some important formulas here. Odds in favor of is odds of the outcome for A to odds of the outcome against A. And if we're doing odds against, it's the number of outcomes against to the number of outcomes for. And again, our two outcomes will total up to the complete number of elements in our sample space. All right, so let's take a look at our first example here again. So we had these dots in the bag, or these marbles in the bag. We have 4 black and 5 white, or 5 that are non-black, and we want to express this as odds. Well, we know that our probability of getting a black was 4 out of 9, and we know the probability of not getting a black was 5 out of 9. So the odds in favor of a white marble being selected is, all right, well, if we have 4 black marbles, that means we have 5 white marbles. So in that bag, we have 5 white and 4 black. So the odds in favor of white, that means we want white, and in favor of means it goes first, and not white would go second here. So if we're looking at this, this is the odds of having a white and not having a white, or in this case, it's black. It's really important when you're reading these that we look for in favor of or against. Guaranteed on a multiple choice question, both options are going to be listed. All right, for the next one, it says to write the odds against a white marble being selected. Well, again, we have 5 whites and 4 blacks. So odds against means the white ones will go on the opposite side. So this is the 4 and this is the against. So against is 4, 4 is second. So these are our whites and these are not whites. So if we think about this in terms of how we would say it, we would have 4 to 5. So odds against is 4 to 5. That means 4 not whites for every 5 that are white. All right, we're just going to work through a couple more examples today. Another way that we can talk about odds is we can talk about even odds. And this is a term that's sometimes used in the medical field. So even odds are when odds for and the odds against are equal. So the ratio for even odds is 1 to 1. Okay. Or we often think about this more, especially when we're thinking about raffles, 50-50. Okay, so even odds means there's a 50% chance of it happening and a 50% chance of it not happening. So it's 50-50. If we were to write the probability of odds, odds is 1 to 1. Remember, that means our total is 1 plus 1, which is 2. So this is going to be 1 over 1 plus 1, which is 1 over 2. So example number 3 here says, after suffering a severe heart attack, Mr. Johnson's doctor told him that he had even odds of making a full recovery. Okay. Now, honestly, I think most doctors are going to come in and give you an actual percentage, but this doctor came in and said that this person has even odds of making a full recovery. And the question is, what is the probability that Mr. Johnson makes a full recovery? Well, if he has even odds, that means he's got a 50-50 shot of recovering, or in lowest terms, 1 to 1, which again, as a probability, would be 1 over 2. So his probability of recovery is 1 over 2. Now, Stephanie's been told that the probability she will make a full recovery is 0.65, or we can think about it as a percentage, 65%. So express in lowest terms the odds in favor of Stephanie making a full recovery. Well, if we think about this in terms of probability, we've got 65 over 100, and 65 over 100 can be reduced to lowest terms. Okay, 65 over 100 would be 13 over 20. So 13 over 20. This would be the probability of a full recovery. So probability of recovery is 13 out of 20. And if we were to write this in terms of odds, it says odds in favor of. So what we want is the 13 out of the total possible is 20. So what we want is 13 and what we don't want is 7. So 13 plus 7 has to total up to 20. So our odds in favor of would be 13 to 20. Now you could have done this just as easily using the 65 and the 100. If we think about that, 65 is what we want, 35 is what we don't want, 65 to 35. But again, we would put this in lowest terms, 13 to 7. So if you're checking to see if you've mixed up odds and probability, think about that total. Odds should always add up to the total. Probability, the total will be in the denominator. All right, so let's look at an example with regards to horses. Horse races are often, when there's a horse race and the odds of a horse winning or losing is posted, it's often expressed as odds and not probability. So if you're placing a bet on a horse, and by no means am I advocating for gambling here, this is just an example of where it's used. But when placing bets on horse races, the chances that each horse will win are often quoted as odds. And more importantly, it's often quoted as odds against. And so it's really important that you read whether it's odds in favor of or odds against. So I want you to look at this chart and ask yourself, which horse is the favorite to win the race? Free Spirit is a 2-to-1 against. 2-to-1 against. Windstorm is 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 against. Foxtrot is 7-to-2 against. Gatsby is 8-to-1 against, and Lucky Star is 11-to-1 against. And so the question is, which horse is the favorite to win? And hopefully your answer was Free Spirit. Now, sometimes when we're first looking at odds, it's difficult to figure that out. We will later in the example convert these to probabilities. And so if you're having trouble understanding odds at a glance, convert everything to probability, and then that's something you're more familiar with. So let's look at what does odds against mean. So Free Spirit is the horse to beat, but let's look at what that actually means. So if the odds for Free Spirit are 2-to-1 against, that means for every, so for every race here, for every 2 times that he doesn't win, so for every 2 times that Free Spirit doesn't win, he will win once. Okay, so 2-to-1 against means for every 2 times he loses or doesn't win, 1 time he wins. For Windstorm, for every 3 times he loses, he wins once. Foxtrot, for every 7 times he loses, he wins 2 times. Gatsby, for every 8 times he loses, he wins once. And then Lucky Star, for every 1 time or 11 times he loses, he wins once. So notice that all of them have a 1 at the end there, but Free Spirit is losing significantly less than, say, Lucky Star. So Free Spirit is definitely the horse to beat. So let's convert these to probabilities. Remember that all of these are going to add up to totals. So 2 and 1 adds up to 3, 3 and 1 adds up to 4, 9, 9, and 12. And so if we were looking at the probability of Free Spirit, well, remember that it's odds against. So what we want is the 1. So it's going to be the probability of winning is 1 out of 2 plus 1, which is 1/3. Windstorm, probability of winning is 1 out of 1 plus 3, which is 1/4. Foxtrot would be 2/9. Gatsby would be 1/9. Again, that's 1 plus 8. And then Lucky Star is 1 out of 12. So those would be the probabilities to win. Again, because it was odds against, the favorable amount was in the second part of the ratio. Next question says to determine the sum of the probabilities. Well, if we add up 1/3 plus 1/4 plus 2/9 plus 1/9 plus 1/12, we should get 1. And the significance of that, the reason it's a 1, 1 would represent 100% possibility. Well, it has to add up to 1 because there's only 5 horses in the race and one of them has to win. So since at least one of the, or since one horse has to win, the probability of a horse winning the race is 100%. Okay. So this would represent the probability of Free Spirit winning, or Windstorm, or Foxtrot, or Gatsby, or Lucky Star. And when we add up all those probabilities, we get 1. Because if you remember from math, or means add. All right, let's look at one more example here. So we're going to look at the odds, or how we would write the odds in favor of Foxtrot winning the race. Well, right now, odds against is 7-2. So odds in favor of would be 2-7. All right, so that's the lesson on odds. It's again important that you remember odds is part to part and probability is part to whole. And if you keep that in mind, you should have a good understanding between the two. All right, thanks guys, and we'll see you soon.